There's much more to this story, particularly because of the conversation that we've been having as a country about gun violence and mental illness. A lot of people are wondering if this guy should have even had his hands on a gun in the first place. And Phil Buck is here with some answers that you'll want to hear. Phil, give us some perspective on this one.
Well, I mean, to answer that question in a word, no. I mean, he was not supposed to have guns. He's a convicted felon. He has a long list of run-ins with law enforcement. I found at least 10 domestic violence related incidents, and
Wow.
that is just a fraction of what's on his court history. I also got in touch with the Hillsborough State Attorney's Office, and you know they've had this big push to take guns away from domestic abusers, and they told me in a word that he is a felon with a history of domestic violence. They say Jeziorski should never have had a gun in the first place. And clearly that didn't stop him from arming himself to the teeth. I mean, look at what he had on him when police went to serve that warrant today. He had an assault rifle and a 9mm pistol with a bunch of 30-round magazines when he fired at those officers today.
Terrifying situation. And we know that patients' privacy has to be protected in all cases. But what were we able to find out, if anything, about this guy's documented mental history?
Not a lot. I mean, we heard the police chief bring up mental health a couple of times today when talking about this, but I have not seen any official diagnosis of mental illness in looking into Jeziorski. I will say, I mean, let's take a look at what the police chief had to say just regarding some of that.
This gentleman has a violent background. He has a history of violence and has a history of threats of violence towards his family. You know, this goes to show you the mental health crisis that our country is undergoing, and the gun issue, the amount of guns out there on the street.
And you know, Katie, I mean, the chief brings up an important connection when it comes to America's gun violence problem. You know, if we want to say mental illness is the driving force, and there's a lot of evidence that says that that's not the case. But if we're blaming mental illness, then we also need to look at the sheer number of guns that are already out there and whether or not they're being stored safely. Because even if you're prohibited from having a gun for whatever reason, that means nothing if you can just take one from one of your family members, and that is what looks like happened in this case. These weren't his guns. Police say that they think he took them from a family member.